Hello, my name is Fiona. I'm 19, and the life of my family changed because of my father. In the end, I had to testify against him in court, and to be honest, I don't regret it. My father had always been a great man. He treated my mom like a queen and spent a lot of time with me and my brother, Jeffrey. He always took pride in his work. So when he lost his job, it was like he also lost a big part of himself. He began to drink a lot, and it was painful to see him like that. But it became even worse when he started to gamble all of our money away, hoping to win big. All of us tried to help him, especially Mom. He never wanted her to work because he wanted her to just enjoy life. But she was forced to find a job. Dad was making promises to us every day, but of course, he always broke them and went straight back to drinking and gambling. Because of this, we went almost completely broke, and we desperately needed money. So my dad did something horrible. He found his old pals from school who were involved in some shady business. I can't say exactly what it was, but needless to say, it was illegal. As soon as money started coming in, Dad changed back to his old confident self. But of course, Mom wasn't happy about it at all. She tried to talk with him, but Dad wouldn't listen because he thought that it was a good solution to our problems. We tolerated it, and of course, I didn't know that much at first, but it all changed once Dad tried to make Jeffrey a part of it. You see, Jeffrey has always looked up to Dad. He taught Jeffrey everything he knew, and he was a great friend to him. So of course, when Dad asked Jeffrey to help, Jeffrey instantly agreed. He simply couldn't even imagine that Dad could do anything wrong. Often Dad or Jeffrey would come home incredibly late, and the worst part was that they were enjoying whatever they'd been doing. All those late evenings, I was listening to how Mom was sobbing silently, and she could barely look at Dad or Jeffrey when they got home. She tried to act like everything was normal between them, but she had this sickly and worried facial expression all the time. I was begging my father to stop, because at this point, he didn't even try to find a normal job, but he was always saying that everything would be fine and that I shouldn't worry. I was incredibly scared for Mom, and especially Jeffrey, because he was only 15 and didn't even understand what he was doing. He could have ruined his whole life. I loved my dad, but he was a different man now. So I did something drastic. I went to the police and told them everything I knew, the names of my father's friends and what they were doing. I didn't say anything about Jeffrey because I wanted to protect him. I really didn't want to do that. I still loved Dad, but I was simply afraid of what could happen next. After a long trial, which I didn't play a big part in because the police had already been making a case against them for a long time, my father was put in jail. It wasn't a long time, less than a year, but needless to say, it shook our family to the core. Mom didn't get better in any way. In fact, she got worse. She was thinking about leaving Dad for good. She spent a lot of time working so our family could have just enough money to get by, even with me finding a part-time job. But the worst thing happened to Jeffrey. He hated me for betraying Dad. He didn't even consider me his sister anymore. He thought that everything my father did was right, so he continued to do what he did with our father. This basically meant that everything I'd done to save our family was completely meaningless. I tried to talk with him, but he refused to answer. He would ignore me or look at me like I was the worst human in history. There was only one person who could help, my father. So I actually had to go and visit him. I hadn't done that yet, and I don't know why. Was it because I hated him or because I was scared he would hate me? Especially because nobody else visited him. Mom couldn't force herself to see his face. And Jeffrey was underage, but they talked on the phone often. So I made an appointment, and after a few days, I was there. My heart was beating like crazy, and I was sweating. And then I saw my father. He was looking at me with a smile, but at the same time, there were tears in his eyes. At first, we just sat there silently, unable to say a single word to each other. Finally, Dad started talking, and he was apologizing for everything he had done. I couldn't say much because it was so incredibly hard to say anything. So Long story short, I explained to him what was happening and asked if Dad could talk some sense into Jeffrey. I almost begged him to do it. Dad agreed, but then Jeffrey would have to come in because Dad couldn't talk about this on the phone. Jeffrey would refuse to come with me, even if it meant that he would see Dad. So I had to ask Mom to do it. She went pale and refused almost immediately. I explained to her that it was the only way to make Jeffrey stop what he was doing, and she finally agreed. But she didn't want to talk with Dad. As I later found out, Dad was even more emotional than the first time. And of course, it was painful to see Mom being so cold and distant. He talked some sense into Jeffrey, and soon enough, my brother cut all his ties with the illegal stuff. After this, everything got a bit more stable. Mom and I were working, and Jeffrey concentrated on his studies. Sadly, he still refused to talk with me, and sometimes even with Mom, and he was still out a lot, hanging out with his friends because he didn't want to be at home with us. Mom started opening up to me more, and I found out that she was almost 100% sure that she wanted a divorce almost immediately when my father gets released from jail. She was tired and exhausted, but somehow stronger. She tried to make her relationship with Jeffrey better, and sometimes even took him to visit Dad. I stopped visiting him after that because it was just too hard for me. I was an emotional wreck by this point, losing interest in my friends and in my life, not even being able to plan my future life and education. After another 6 months, my father was released from jail. Jeffrey was happy and, well, I was too. But soon he and my mom told us that they were separating. They were still married, but as soon as my father found a job, he moved out and started to live separately. Of course, he didn't get much, so he lived in a really rundown apartment, and he tried to give as much as he could to us. After a while, Jeffrey moved in with him. This was the moment when our family separated completely. Me and my mother, and Jeffrey with our father, and none of us communicated much. Me and my mother were getting by. We even started to rent a few rooms in our house on Airbnb. We were always exhausted, but at least we were talking. She missed Jeffrey a lot, and she didn't say it directly, but I could tell she missed Dad as well. I was constantly exhausted from work. I miss them too. And one day, when Jeffrey reached out to me, I felt happy. It didn't last long, though, because there was a reason why he reached out. Turns out, our father was working a lot during the daytime, and every evening he would drink his sorrows away. He tried to appear strong in front of Jeffrey, but it was clear that he was depressed because his actions had destroyed our family. A few times during the weekends, Jeffrey even had to drag our father home from bars that he went to alone because most of his friends bailed on him after everything that happened. Dad blamed himself for destroying our family, although Jeffrey tried to persuade him that for almost our entire life, he was the one who kept all of us together. But that didn't help at all. This made Jeffrey realize that, most of all, our dad wanted me and Jeffrey to be friends again, or at least to talk. So we said sorry to each other and hugged, although we had never done that before in our whole entire life. I guess it's true that tough times can make family ties stronger. After a while, I found the courage to visit my dad. His apartment looked horrible, but he was happy to see me, and more importantly, to see me and Jeffrey talking again. We tried to spend as much time with him as possible to stop him from drinking, and it paid off. He became much more confident and optimistic, just like he was before. And he promised that once he got the chance, he would try to help me with my college studies by providing some money for me. At first, I wanted to refuse his offer, but I knew that he needed to do that to feel important. And, well, I needed it as well. Jeffrey was spending a lot of time with Mom, even helping a lot with chores at the house. It was clear that it was something our dad put him up to. Dad was asking a lot about Mom and how she was. He was always telling us stories about how they met and how she was the only woman he ever loved. Mom, on the other hand, was just scared and not sure what to do next. I know she wanted to reconnect with Dad, but her friends and relatives were saying how she should leave him and that he was a bad man. Those were the same people who were more than happy to take my father's money and gifts in the past. Me and Jeffrey cut out all contact with them because they were such horrible hypocrites. And then finally, one day, as I was getting home from work, I noticed that my mom was talking on the phone, smiling and laughing. It was clear that she was talking with our father. Even if they wouldn't be together anymore, at least they would be friends. At this moment, I realized that our family had survived and was stronger than ever. Please share this story with your friends and family so they will know that nothing can destroy a family as long as you stick together.
Hey, I'm Billy, and I can't read. I'm not blind, not stupid, nothing like that. I am dyslexic. It generally means that I am physically not able to read nor write. Or better, I can do it, but do it 100 times slower than other people. But don't feel sorry for me. I'm happy this way. Let me tell you what happened to me. My parents had always told me that I needed to be the best in studies to excel in life. They are both very successful. My dad is a lawyer and my mum is a physicist, so my future was well defined from my birth. I was supposed to become nothing less than a brain surgeon, and indeed, I remember my early years already doing a lot of early development. Maths, science for kids, things like that. The only thing that confused my parents was that I didn't manage to learn to read, but I was still very small, so they thought as far as I was going to school anyway, they would teach me there. When school started, I immediately saw that I was slower than other kids. That was strange. I had never seemed stupid before. I was quick-minded and easily understood anything I was explained. But when it came to reading or working with a text of any kind, I seemed an authentic retard. Even worse, writing. For me, letters were looking like splashes of water that were constantly changing their shape and size. My teachers told me, concentrate, but what should I do if for me they were like flies escaping from paper? I remember my first test that we got marks for. I understood it was very important to bring a good mark to my parents, to show them I am not stupid. I did my best, but unfortunately managed to answer only 3 questions out of 12 in time. I didn't understand why. The questions were not hard. I knew the answers, but it just took a lot of time to understand what was written and compose the written answer. I broke a sweat. Last thing I managed to do was write my name, Bill Bumble, on it. As the teacher looked them over, she asked me to stand up and read my name from the paper. Bill Bumble, I said. She insisted that I read it from the paper. With effort, I read what I wrote. It was Bill Dumble. Everyone was laughing at me, and I was there all embarrassed. Should I say that Dumble became my nickname from that moment on? That was sad, and all I got was people mocking me all day, and a D-. I decided not to suffer on my own, and came to my parents. They frowned when I told them that I nearly got an F, but as I told them about my vanishing letter problem, they decided to take me to an eye doctor. She checked my eyes and confirmed that they are absolutely okay, but proposed a visit to another doctor who specializes in learning problems. He was a very nice person who listened to me attentively and asked me to show how I write. I did my best, but failed, because I was too nervous maybe. There I said I could draw what I saw instead. I like to draw a lot, and I guess it was the only thing I was brilliant at. I drew things just how I saw them. The doc told my parents that I had a talent, and they seemed very impressed seeing it themselves. He then said I had dyslexia, and it is a chronic condition that can be improved but not cured, and that I needed to adapt to the studies somehow. He gave recommendations to prolong my test timing and to use more audio materials, but after some time at school, I understood that I lagged behind, and everyone was mocking me for this. It was hard to concentrate on the subjects, and my marks went down even more. Thus, my parents enrolled me to another school that specialized in individualized creative teaching. That's how I found out I am actually pretty smart. I had a tutor who adapted all the studies to my visual comprehension. I got creative tasks of drawing some process or rule instead of describing it in written. I got audiobooks instead of textbooks. And also, I got art classes where I became the best at once. I am still far from finishing school. I'm in my early teens. I can say that I know what I want to be. There is no choice. I want to be an artist because it is the thing that I enjoy most in my life. I am sorry that I can't fulfill the dreams of my parents, who expected me to become a top student, but my dyslexia decided for me, and they have accepted the fact. But for dyslexia, I would have to study all those things I'm not so good at, and probably struggle to have the possibility to do what I like, which is drawing. Now I can say that I am happy, and let those letters fly away, I am better without them.